Now, as we speak, hundreds of journalists, economists, industry figures and interest groups are in the budget lockups. They leave their phones at the door and they head in to read the speech and pick their way through the documents and the numbers and assess the budget so that once the Treasurer finishes his speech tonight, they can hit the airwaves telling us all we need to know and what they think of it all. Thank God I'm not locked up in there this year. But earlier today, I caught up with the Research Director of the Centre for Independent Studies, Simon Cowan, before he entered the lockup, and I started by asking him what he looked for first in the budget papers and what he expected to find today.
Well, it depends a little bit on what you're expecting from the budget. So in 2014, for example, the first place I looked at was the fiscal estimates in terms of what the government was going to do with spending or not. These days, it's certainly almost the aggregate economic estimates that are more important. What's going to happen with wages? What's going to happen with inflation? What's Treasury's best guess of what we're expecting with economic conditions? This time round, I'm expecting to see some horror figures again on the bottom line, a significant increase in debt, but the real story will be how bullish Treasury is about the economic recovery and wages, and exactly how far they think inflation is going to go up.
Now, what are the concerns there that they might be a little bit too bullish in their estimates, because there are some uncertainties in the global outlook, aren't there?
They sure have, and what we've seen in previous budgets is a wide divergence between the forecasts and the actual outcomes, and the end result of that being significant deviations in the bottom line of the budget. And I think, again, with the amount of uncertainty that we've seen through COVID, the amount of uncertainty we're seeing play out in Eastern Europe, the US inflation statistics in particular and their significant rise, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty around these budget forecasts. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty around the budget bottom line, and the end result of that is the rosy predictions that the government is going to make tonight may not be the situation we face in a few months' time.
Yeah, it's a worry because there's going to be a lot of spending in the budget. Some of the things that have been foreshadowed are cash payments for pensioners and other welfare recipients. Do you think that's justified in the current situation?
It's an important thing to understand that pensions and allowances, things like JobKeeper, things like JobSeeker, the age pension, are automatically indexed to inflation. And it was only a couple of weeks ago that we saw the biannual indexation of pensions and JobSeeker payments applied. So pensions went up, the single pension went up about $500 a year, JobSeeker went up about $300 a year in indexation. That is designed to take care of inflation. What is going to happen tonight in terms of the one-off handouts that have been indicated, that is simply just a pre-election budget sweetener. There is no economic justification for that payment, and there's a genuine concern, I think, when we are seeing rising inflation, when inflation is above the RBA band at 3.5% annualised, what we saw last time. In the US, it's sort of 6-7%. That additional cash handouts will simply flow through into even more inflation and defeat even the limited purpose that the government pretends that they're for.
What about a measure that's supposed to suppress prices, that is the temporary cut in fuel excise to try and take pressure off petrol prices? Isn't this pointless? Won't we see that swamped by increases in global oil prices possibly? Or on the other hand, maybe there'll be a drop in oil prices which will show it wasn't necessary. It's just really just throwing money around that may never be noticed by anybody.
Exactly. The purpose of this is so that government can appear like it's doing something on cost of living. What we should have learnt from the situation over the last couple of months, petrol prices in particular, but inflation more broadly, is that government actually doesn't have anything like the level of control over cost of living issues that they like to pretend that they do have. And what they're actually doing by putting out these measures, by claiming that it's the government's responsibility through fiscal policy to deal with cost of living issues, is that they're letting the culprits for this off the hook. They're letting the Reserve Bank go from the fact that it undershot inflation for a decade, and now inflation's going up with no real action on the horizon from the RBA. And it's taking some of the heat out of, or the pressure away from businesses to give wage rises. We're seeing predictions of unemployment falling to 3.75%. That should be flowing through into strong wage growth. It's things like that. It's like RBA measures in relation to containing inflation and wage growth. That's what we should be seeing deal with cost of living, not temporary government handouts and small cuts in excise.
This is the big question, though, isn't it? Why aren't we seeing an increase in wages? Why hasn't there been wage growth when we've got such low unemployment? Labor seems to suggest they can deliver wage growth if they're elected into government. What are your thoughts? Why isn't it happening?
Well, part of it, I think, is just the lag in reporting. I would expect that what we will see, particularly if unemployment stays low in the coming 6 to 12 months, is that will definitely flow through into wages. Inflation will also likely flow through into wages. So I think part of it's just a lag. You know, we're coming out of the COVID pandemic situation. We're moving into a higher growth, low unemployment situation. That'll feed through into wages, I think, in relatively short order. I think, but there's also been a fair bit of slack in that area for quite some time. We've seen, I think, low wages growth as part of that package of low economic growth, relatively low inflation and low wages for at least the last 5 or 6 years. And we do need to see that start to flow through. I think there is a lag in relation to that setting up. But one thing that I think we do need to be careful about is trying to turn back the clock to the sort of solutions that Labor is hinting at here, which is bringing unions more involved in the negotiating process, trying to move back towards more of that centralised wage fixing, wage determination process. And we've seen here, particularly in New South Wales, the unions are starting to flex their muscle in the run-up to this election and starting to call for significant wage increases, but also, as we've seen on the trains, industrial action.
Yes, indeed. Governments can increase wages in some sectors, but it sounds like whoever wins the election might be in a good position to see some wage growth happening naturally anyway. Thanks so much for joining us, Simon. We'll see what else is in there tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chris.